Hi guys, and welcome on Cheaters and Jerks. This channel is about real-life cheating stories and consequences.
I remember the day I came home from Singapore and realized that everything I thought I knew about my wife, Joan, had changed. For a long time, I believed we were this stable couple. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, a decent home in a nice neighborhood, and a life plan that made sense. Maybe I was just fooling myself, or maybe I got too focused on my work. I don't know. All I know is that when I came back after months away, the house didn't feel right. Jean didn't look at me the same way, and something in her eyes said she was carrying secrets I wasn't meant to know. It started with small details. Before I even saw her, I got weird vibes from text messages and calls that she never answered when I was on the phone. My birthday passed without a word from her, even though our kids, Dean and Katie, texted me sweet messages and my entire family remembered. Jean didn't. But that was nothing compared to what happened when I learned she had been spending time in cafes and restaurants with her boss, Anthony Miller, often bringing the kids along to make it seem innocent. Except it wasn't innocent. Something about it felt so off. The quiet corner tables, the way her hand would brush his arm, as if that touch meant something deep, the way she smiled at him with a warmth I hadn't seen in years. That told me more than I wanted to admit. But before I dive into that, let's rewind to how I ended up back home. Getting fired on my birthday wasn't how I imagined my return to the States. I was in Singapore for work, helping my company, JP Morgan, with an international investment project. We were looking at some fish aquaculture company on the Singapore Stock Exchange, CA for short, and I thought it was a smart move. I truly believed CA would bounce back despite short-term losses. Turns out, my bosses didn't agree. When I landed in Chicago after a brutal 20-hour flight, I headed straight for a meeting on the 8th floor of JP Morgan's Dearborn office. Joe, the VP of International Trading, and Samuel, the corporate lawyer, sat me down and basically said, "Adam, we're done with you. Here's some severance. Sign these papers." I walked out of there with a decent payout, enough to keep me afloat, but no job and a damaged reputation. So there I was, jobless on my birthday in Chicago, thinking about how I'd explain this to Jean and the kids. But to be honest, I was more anxious about what I'd find at home. The tension between Jean and me started long before I went to Singapore. I just never named it. I figured we'd be fine once I came back. Well, guess what? I was wrong. I made my way back home to Springfield. It's not a big city, but it's comfortable, and we had a nice suburban house with a yard, a basement, and good neighbors. Walking into that house after months away, the first thing I noticed was the mess. Dusty floors, dishes piled in the sink, dirty laundry everywhere. Our kids weren't total slobs, so this level of mess told me Jean had kind of stopped caring. Normally, she'd at least keep the place somewhat tidy. I spent hours cleaning, sweeping, vacuuming, throwing away old food containers. I sorted laundry into separate loads and got the washing machine going. I tried to shake off the creepy feeling I had. Later that afternoon, I decided I'd cook a nice dinner. I went to the store, grabbed ingredients for a Thai green curry, something I learned to make decently while traveling. Cooking relaxed me, and I wanted to give my kids a good meal. Around 6 p.m., Jean's car pulled up. The kids rushed in, excited to see me, hugging me like they hadn't seen me in a year. I guess 4 months felt long to them. Katie, my youngest, was all smiles and tears, clinging to my neck. Dean, who was getting older and cooler by the day, tried to act chill, but I could tell he was happy to have me home. Jean stood in the doorway watching us. I saw tears in her eyes. At first, I thought it was happiness, but looking closely, I realized her sadness was deeper. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, not the warm kiss I'd expect from a wife seeing her husband after a long absence. She said, "Welcome home, Adam," in a quiet voice, her eyes darting away. I remember the smell of lemongrass and basil from the curry drifting around us, and I thought, what happened to us? At dinner, I told stories about Singapore, how I tried indoor golfing, took part in dragon boat races as a spectator, visited some cool interactive arcades. The kids loved it. Katie and Dean asked all sorts of questions, and their laughter filled the room. Jean barely spoke. She ate slowly, nodding, smiling politely, but staying quiet. After dinner, the kids surprised me with a birthday gift, a Band of Brothers DVD set. They must have saved their allowance or gotten help from grandparents. Meanwhile, Jean just said, Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot your birthday. The tone was flat. I said it was no big deal, but inside, I felt a sting. That night, after the kids went to bed, I tried talking to Jean. I asked if everything was okay. She said work was stressful and that she felt down because I was gone too often. It's just been hard, Adam, she said quietly, tears welling up. She let me hold her while she cried softly. I wanted to comfort her, but part of me knew there was more she wasn't telling me. The next morning, jet-lagged and anxious, I went for an early run. After that, I made breakfast for the kids. They told me how Mom took them out a few times with her boss, Mr. Miller, and his daughter Evelyn. Mini golf, movies, nice dinners. Katie shrugged it off as fun times. Dean, who was more observant, said quietly, Mom seemed happier when she was with them. That stung. Why wasn't she happier with me? I dropped the kids at school and started making calls. I wanted to reestablish myself in the financial world. I still believed in CA shares. I contacted my old mentor, George, who ran a small brokerage and respected my judgment. He agreed to look at the CA prospectus and talk about possible investors. Then I ran errands, hoping to calm my mind, and who did I see as I left a pharmacy near St. John's Hospital? Jean and Evelyn Miller, walking out with serious expressions. They looked upset, like they'd just gotten bad news. They hopped into an Uber and sped off. Was someone sick? Was Anthony Miller in the hospital? As my curiosity grew, I needed hard facts. I hired a private investigator, Clarence, a guy my dad knew. Clarence sounded capable, and I gave him a deposit. I wanted to know what was up with Jean and Miller, what she did while I was away. It felt terrible doing this, but I had to know the truth. If I accused her without proof, she'd deny it. If I stayed in the dark, I'd go crazy. Meanwhile, I worked on my own plan. I had contacts who trusted my gut feeling about CA shares. I pooled money, mine and theirs, and waited for the right moment. The stock was dropping because of short sellers trying to crush the price. When it hit a low point, I started buying. This took hours of careful trading at odd hours because of the time zone difference with Singapore. I remember sitting in my home office late at night, everyone else asleep, watching numbers flash on the screen. The price dipped to around $5.61, and I grabbed as many shares as I could. Suddenly, other investors noticed activity and joined in. The price began to climb. By morning, it was back around $9 or $10. I felt a surge of hope. I might rebuild my fortune on my own terms. A couple of days later, Clarence called with the results of his investigation. He confirmed that Jean had been involved with Anthony Miller for at least 2 years. The affair wasn't a recent fling. It spanned years of my traveling for work. Evelyn knew and helped them find time together. When I was gone, sometimes the kids would be sent to friends' houses overnight so Jean could spend time with Miller. My heart clenched at this news. 2 years of betrayal. I paced around my study, gripping my phone, feeling both sick and furious. Clarence also said Miller had pancreatic cancer and might have only a few months to live. That explained the hospital visits and Jean's sadness. She was losing the man she loved, the man she chose over me. I spent the rest of that day in a haze. Should I confront Jean? Should I throw her out immediately? Part of me wanted to scream at her, call her awful names, and kick her to the curb. But another part told me to stay calm, think strategically. I decided I wanted revenge, not just a screaming match. Miller had taken my wife, my pride, my peace of mind. He didn't care about my family, so why should I care about him? I heard that Miller was well respected for his charitable work, helping troubled teens, offering housing through some kind of foundation he started with his late wife. If those rumors were true, maybe he was just a generous soul. But my gut said otherwise. Powerful men often have secrets. I wondered if I could find something to bring him down. Clarence came through again, providing a list of people who had stayed in Miller's homes. Some left under strange circumstances. I contacted one, a woman named Lila, who seemed willing to talk for the right price. We met at a cheap motel. I paid her, and she talked about how strict and odd the place had been, hinting that not all was as nice as it seemed. She suggested that if I gave her more money, she could reach out to others who had negative experiences. It wouldn't take much to start rumors that Miller was not the hero everyone thought he was. I knew once these stories came out, the media would jump all over it, especially with the Me Too movement still fresh in everyone's minds. True or not, such accusations would ruin Miller's reputation in business. I felt a bit guilty. I wasn't sure if Miller was actually guilty of abuse or misconduct, but I convinced myself he must have done something wrong. Why else would these women be so ready to speak up for money? I reasoned that at worst, I was just shining a light on the truth. At best, I was getting my revenge. Either way, it would shake his world. Within a week, things started to leak. Evelyn Miller appeared on a local radio show to promote a new project, the New Horizons Home, a permanent place for troubled teens. During the live broadcast, a caller spoke up, claiming Miller had mistreated her. Evelyn tried to defend her father, but another caller backed the first one up. Social media exploded with these stories. Soon, more women were calling in or posting online. The Millers were blindsided. Their perfect image was crumbling. Jean rushed into crisis mode, meeting with Evelyn and lawyers, trying to calm the storm. She told me at home, "This is all lies. Tony would never hurt anyone." I just shrugged and said, "You never know people as well as you think." She shot me a panicked look, like she understood I was hinting at her affair. I just walked away, leaving her to stare after me. As the scandal grew, the New Horizons home opening got postponed. Donors pulled out. The city distanced itself. Soon, the Miller Real Estate, MRE, business started losing customers. House sales fell through. Jean was in tears almost every night, telling me how unfair it all was, how people were making up stories. She kept defending Miller, and I just kept my mouth shut. Inside, I felt a twisted satisfaction. He was suffering. She was suffering. I'd lost my job and my marriage's trust. Now they were losing something too. Meanwhile, CA shares surged upward, from $5.61 to $10, then to $12, $15, even hitting $24 at one point. I sold some, locked in profits, and secured over $1 million for myself, and even more for my investors. They were thrilled. I was thrilled too. I proved I didn't need JP Morgan. I didn't need anyone. I started making plans with George to form our own small investment firm. Everything was lining up nicely on that front. Then it was time to deal with Jean. I confronted her with divorce papers. I did it one afternoon when Evelyn was at our house trying to talk strategy. I placed the papers on the coffee table, poured 3 glasses of cheap champagne I found in the fridge, and said, "Well, ladies, we're making a new start. Jean, I'm divorcing you." Jean's jaw dropped. Evelyn gasped, dropping her glass and spilling champagne on the carpet. Jean started crying, asking why I would do this now. I just smiled coldly and said, "You know why." Evelyn tried to defend her friend, but I ignored her. I gave Jean 2 hours to pack and leave. She shouted, "You can't do this." I shrugged and said, "Watch me." She tried to play tough, saying she'd get a lawyer. I smirked. "Go ahead, spend all your money on legal fees. I'm ready." After they left, I sat alone, feeling a heavy weight. I didn't feel happy. Revenge felt bitter. I realized I was breaking up my family, but there was no turning back now. In the weeks that followed, lawyers got involved. Jean's lawyer tried to claim half of everything. I had hidden my money well. Most of it was offshore or channeled through new accounts. I showed that I had set up college funds for the kids, so they were safe. Jean insisted I must have more money, but I said my investments failed. She didn't believe me, but she couldn't prove otherwise. I offered a deal. She keeps the house until the kids turn 18. I pay some child support, but no alimony. If she fought, I'd drag it out for years. She knew I'd do it, so she backed down. The Miller scandal got worse. 4 women filed a class-action lawsuit accusing Miller of abuse when they stayed at his homes. Evelyn tried to negotiate settlements. The media hammered at them daily. Anthony Miller was stuck in the hospital, his health declining, and reporters wanted to know if he'd face criminal charges. In the end, Miller paid out millions in settlements, going bankrupt in the process. Their company shut down. Whatever legacy he tried to build was gone. At home, Dean and Katie struggled to understand why Mommy and Daddy were divorcing. I didn't tell them the full truth. I said their mom and I had grown apart and we both loved them, but we couldn't stay married. Dean asked if it had anything to do with Mr. Miller. I paused, then nodded. "Your mom and Mr. Miller were close, and it hurt our marriage." "I'm sorry, son." Katie cried, not fully understanding. I held them both. I felt horrible for dragging them into this mess, but I couldn't lie to them forever. Jean moved out temporarily. Later, she tried to talk to me, asking if I started the rumors about Miller. I said I didn't start anything. I just watched it unfold. She looked frightened, probably guessing I was behind it. "How could you do this?" she whispered. I laughed bitterly. "Ask yourself that question. You cheated for 2 years. What did you think would happen?" She left, shaking her head. Miller died a couple of weeks after the lawsuits were finalized. Cancer finished him off. There was no redemption, no heroic comeback. He died in disgrace. Evelyn tried to salvage something, but ended up leaving town to start fresh somewhere else. I heard she sold what was left of their assets. Good riddance. With Miller gone, Jean tried to rebuild her life. I focused on the kids and my business. George and I set up a small trading company. We specialized in undervalued international stocks. We got clients from my old network. We made a steady profit. I bought the building that was supposed to be the New Horizons home and decided to turn it into a real shelter for women, run by women, with proper oversight. I named it after my mom, Joy Carter. The press covered it as a positive story of someone who stepped in where Miller failed. Of course, the irony was that I caused his downfall, but nobody knew that. The community praised me for my kindness. Over the next few months, Jean and I finalized the divorce. The kids stayed with her most of the time, but I had generous visitation, especially on weekends. She needed weekends for work anyway, so it worked out. We kept things civil for Dean and Katie's sake. I guess we both realized fighting more would only hurt the kids. She knew what she did was wrong, and I knew I had taken revenge a step too far, but neither of us said it out loud. Instead, we acted polite and distant, like co-workers forced to share an office. Life went on. I talked to my dad about all of this. He was disappointed in how everything turned out, but supportive. He understood my anger and hurt. He also suggested I consider counseling to handle my trust issues and anger. After some time, I agreed. Talking to a therapist helped me see that I let my pain control me. I turned into a man who would do anything to get even. I hurt people along the way, not just Miller and Jean, but possibly innocent bystanders too. Did I push those women to come forward with exaggerated stories? Maybe. Did I ruin Evelyn's life unfairly? Possibly. The therapist said I should try to forgive myself. It would be a long process. Financially, I was set. The CA shares worked out great. I invested wisely afterwards, and my small firm thrived. Dean and Katie grew older, got involved in sports and clubs, and did well in school. They adjusted to the divorce. Years passed. Jean remarried an older guy who treated the kids decently. Dean and Katie said he was a nice man, more stable and present than I had been. That stung, but maybe they were right. I was always traveling before. Maybe my absence helped push Jean into Miller's arms, though that doesn't excuse her choice. I stayed single for a long time, not sure if I wanted another relationship. The trust I once had in people was broken, but I enjoyed my freedom, traveled a bit, on my own terms, and visited Asia for business without worrying about what was happening back home. Dad stayed involved in our lives, happy to see me build something good out of the mess. The shelter in my mom's name did well and helped a lot of women. That made me feel like I wasn't a total villain. I had done something positive. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Anthony Miller and what could have happened if I had just talked to Jean openly before things got so bad. Maybe we could have parted ways more peacefully. Maybe the affair wouldn't have lasted 2 years if I paid more attention to my family. But it's no use dwelling on what-ifs. I made my choices, and so did they. In the end, I came out on top financially, but lost what I thought was a secure marriage. I told myself it was worth it, that I'd rather know the truth than live a lie. But sometimes, I wonder if ignorance might have spared me this painful journey. The important thing is that Dean and Katie grew up feeling loved by both parents, and their futures look bright. They learned that life can be messy, that people aren't always who they seem, and that sometimes we have to rebuild after a disaster. Maybe that's a lesson worth learning. One afternoon, about 4 years after the divorce, I took Dean and Katie out for ice cream. We sat at a picnic table, enjoying the sunshine. Katie brought up the old days, saying she remembered when Mom was acting weird and I was away a lot. Dean nodded, adding that at the time he didn't fully get what was happening. I said, "Well, your mom and I had our problems, but we love you both so much. People make mistakes, and we can't change the past. But we're all okay now, right?" They agreed, smiling. Katie squeezed my hand. Dean said, "I'm glad you're here, Dad." That meant more to me than any amount of money or success. After all the anger, revenge, and lies, I still had my kids, and I still had a chance to be a better father to them. That was something Miller or Jean or anyone else could never take away. By the time I dropped them off at their mom's place, I felt a strange sense of peace. Jean opened the door, gave me a polite nod, and smiled at the kids. Behind her stood her new husband, a quiet older guy who waved at me awkwardly. I nodded back, feeling no hatred, no anger, just emptiness. Then I turned and headed back to my car, thinking about tomorrow's work and how I would expand my firm's portfolio in Southeast Asia. Life moves on, people move on, and sometimes the best we can do is learn from the pain and do better next time. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive Jean for what she did. I also don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for what I did in return, but I know that I survived, that I built something new, and that my kids are okay. Maybe that's enough. Over time, I kept in touch with George, my mentor and business partner, who sometimes reminded me, "Adam, remember when you thought everything was over? Look at you now." I'd laugh and say, "Yeah, I remember," not adding that I also recall how low I felt inside, how angry and bitter I became. But life's complicated, and we rarely get a happy ending without some scars. In the end, I guess I learned that trust and honesty matter more than I realized, that family should not be taken for granted, and that revenge, no matter how sweet it seems, always leaves a bitter aftertaste. I stand by what I created after all this mess: a stable career on my own terms, a home for my kids when they visit, and a shelter that helps people who really need it. Maybe I couldn't save my marriage, but I helped save other lives through that shelter. That's something real and good that came out of the chaos. As for Jean, I wish her well. I hope she found what she was looking for. I hope she learned that sneaking around only leads to heartbreak. And as for Miller, he's gone, remembered now as a fallen figure, once admired, now stained by scandal. I doubt anyone outside his immediate family misses him. He left a mess behind. In some corner of my mind, I almost pity him. Almost. But I can't rewrite history. All I can do is keep going forward. I've got work to do, deals to close, places to visit, and kids to raise into kind and responsible adults. After all the ups and downs, that's what matters most. That's what matters most. That's what matters most.